your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Hello, I'm Naveen Day. Thanks for joining us. Sources say Prime Minister Mark Carney will call a federal election on Sunday. That could send Canadians to vote as early as April 28th, marking Canada's 45th federal election. The call would come 2 weeks after Carney was elected as Liberal leader to succeed Justin Trudeau, and just over a week after he was sworn in as Prime Minister along with his new cabinet. A former Liberal MP is warning Canadians about a future with Mark Carney at the helm. On day one as Prime Minister, Carney stopped the consumer carbon tax by putting on a huge show of signing a document. Can the Prime Minister actually do this on his own? Or does this need to be voted on in Parliament? To answer that question and more is Dan McTeague, a former Liberal MP and president of Canadians for Affordable Energy, who sat down with BCN's Jeanette Roche.
Had some experience in passing legislation in my time, including some of my own private members' bills. But look, unless we're talking criminal code, laws are already the blueprint, the permission that Parliament gives to a particular set of laws. Within those laws, the framework that makes up those laws, has to follow the legislation. So the legislation is still there. The regulations as to how to tweak it, how to put it together, how to flush it out is what has been amended here very temporarily. He hasn't said this is going to be permanent. He said he's going to pause it. It just means that the same old, deadly, pernicious, costly carbon tax is going to be there. And one of the suggestions that he's made is, I will go after the consumer carbon tax so that people actually don't see it. It disappeared during the period of the campaign in the hopes that you and I vote for them, only to have it restored, not necessarily as a carbon tax for consumers, but as an industrial business carbon tax. In other words, impose the burden on business, who will then promptly put it right back on our shoulders. For the Liberals, and for the NDP, it's a great scheme because then they can blame the oil companies for their price rise. But folks like me who have no affinity to the oil industry have taken them on will be very quickly point out that if people vote for Mark Carney and his friends in the NDP, they're basically voting themselves a restoration of those very damaging, very costly policies. And make no mistake, as I've heard the leader of the Conservative Party, who I'm not a member of, I've never contributed to, saying he's going to get rid of them. If Canadians want a stark choice in the next campaign, it's the guys who brought you pain, that's the Liberal and NDP, Greens, or the guys who are promising to get rid of it. And I sense that where most Canadians are is that it's not a necessary tax. It's based on CO2. I could never think of a more frivolous means by which we would want to tax anyone, much less make a couple of green grifters very happy and rich.
Yeah, well, and according to the guy who says he wants to get rid of it, so Pierre Poilievre says that this carbon tax legislation is still in place and it hasn't been revoked. So the government could put it back in place again if they feel that it's warranted?
And they will.
Okay.
And they will. Look, I can tell you, it's a shell game, pardon the pun. They're going to take it off so that you vote for them. And the moment you vote for them, they'll do what they did last time. In 2019, they said, no, we wouldn't let carbon taxes go above $80, $80, which is where it is now, $80 a ton. It's going to 170 because they broke their commitment. They said that they would let this thing go even higher, could even go even higher. But reality is that Mr. Carney doesn't want to give people transparency in what he's doing. He wants to hide it, and he wants to force businesses to absorb it. We'll then proceed to promptly pass on.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is responding to comments made about him by U.S. President Donald Trump during a Fox News interview. Trump was asked about a possible upcoming Canadian election during Tuesday night's interview and the fact that polls now suggest that the Liberals are now in the lead. He said he doesn't care who wins, but he thinks it would be easier to deal with a Liberal, while referring to Poilievre as being, quote, no friend of mine. Poilievre told a news conference in Sudbury, Ontario Wednesday that Trump is right to think that he would have an easier time dealing with a Liberal Prime Minister, before referring to himself as a strong leader and a tough negotiator.
Yesterday, the president said that having a Liberal Prime Minister would be easier for him to deal with, just as he threatened once again to make us the 51st state. And you know what? On that point, it's true. I'm a strong leader. I'm a tough guy to deal with. I'm firm in my convictions, and I'll always put Canada first. It's clear that President Trump wants the Liberals in power because they will keep this country weak. That's exactly the kind of weak, compromise, conflicted leadership that Donald Trump wants, and it's why he endorsed Mark Carney yesterday. What Canadians need, though, is a leader who's tough and firm and stands by his convictions, a leader who will make Canada strong, self-reliant, and stand on its own 2 feet, a leader who will put Canada first.
While in Edmonton Thursday, Prime Minister Mark Carney met with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith for the first time since being sworn into office. Following the meeting, Premier Smith sent out a press release saying, quote, "At his request, I met with Prime Minister Mark Carney today. We had a very frank discussion in which I made it clear that Albertans will no longer tolerate the way we've been treated by the federal Liberals over the past 10 years. I provided a specific list of demands the next Prime Minister, regardless of who that is, must address within the first 6 months of their term to avoid an unprecedented national unity crisis. This includes guaranteeing Alberta full access to unfettered oil and gas corridors to the north, east, and west, repealing Bill C-69, also known as the No New Pipelines Act, lifting the tanker ban off the BC coast, eliminating the oil and gas emissions cap, which is a production cap, scrapping the so-called clean electricity regulations, ending the prohibition on single-use plastics, abandoning the net zero car mandate, returning oversight of the industrial carbon tax to the provinces, and halting the federal censorship of energy companies. But the feds seem to have their own plans when it comes to Alberta's energy sector. On Thursday, Environment Minister Terry Duguid said the Ottawa-imposed emissions cap on Alberta's oil and gas will remain in place under a Carney government. According to a report released by the Parliamentary Budget Officer, this cap would cost the Canadian economy more than $20 billion and slash more than 40,000 Canadian jobs. Chris Sims, the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, says this is not a Team Canada approach.
We're hearing all sorts of comments coming from especially, the Eastern power brokers saying, hey, we're all in this together. We have to be Team Canada. We need to be independent. We need to find more markets for our product. Well, how is it you think that keeping a cap on Alberta's oil and gas sector is going to do that? This is right in line with Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines law, which is, of course, strangling our network of pipelines.
The Prime Minister's Alberta visit comes a day after Smith's government tabled a bill seeking to ban federal employees from accessing oil and gas facilities and the emissions data they contain. Smith called the bill a warning to the new Prime Minister that Alberta will continue to fight for the industry. She says the federal government's proposed emissions cap is as much of a threat to Alberta's oil industry as tariffs from the United States.
This amendment to the Critical Infrastructure Defence Act provides an extra tool to safeguard essential infrastructure from interference, and that includes interference from Ottawa. I would certainly hope that the new Prime Minister has taken the time to read our Constitution, and I would direct him to pay specific attention to Section 92A, which gives the province, not the federal government, the exclusive jurisdiction over non-renewable natural resource development. Alberta will continue in its pursuit of doubling our oil and gas production to meet the growing global demand for energy. And we will not let Ottawa stand in our way. We will not tolerate the continuous unconstitutional overreaches made by the federal Liberal government. Measures like the emissions cap, the net zero electricity regs, the net zero electric vehicle mandate, and the energy industry advertising ban must be stopped now.
The amendments update the definition of essential infrastructure to include the 2-kilometer-deep border zone north of the Alberta-Montana border and facilities where oil and gas production and emissions data and records are held. Alberta's opposition NDP dismisses the bill as an illegal, politically performative distraction. And as mentioned earlier, Canadians could be heading to the polls as early as late April. What would it mean for the province of Alberta should the Carney Liberals win? To talk about this is our legislative reporter and Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson.
The Liberals are growing in the polls generally across Canada. There's been some polls in the last couple of days that have shown the Liberals actually pulling ahead of the Conservatives. That is not the case in Alberta, which I don't think will be any surprise to anybody who's followed Alberta politics for the past, 60 years probably. The Conservatives, I think, are sitting at about 55% support in Alberta, and the Liberals at about 30-ish% in Alberta. That's actually an improvement for the Alberta for the Liberals in Alberta over more recent polling. So the Liberals are doing better in Alberta than they were. They're still, totally swamped by support for the Conservatives. What that really means in terms of representation is, is there enough support in sort of any 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 ridings where a Liberal candidate could win? For example, right now, Calgary Skyview has a Liberal MP, and Edmonton Centre has a Liberal MP, and then there's 2 ridings in Edmonton that have New Democrat MPs. So, are those sort of trends going to be sustained? I mean, maybe. Maybe not. Of course, Randy Boissonneau is the Edmonton Centre candidate, and he's faced a lot of controversy recently, so it's hard to say if he'll win. And then George Chahal, the fellow in Calgary Skyview, that riding's actually changing around. And there's a good chance that Chahal's going to run in a new riding called Calgary McKnight. The reason for that is because Alberta's population is growing, and it's grown a lot. And every 10 years, the census figures are used to redistrict our ridings. And so Alberta in the 2021 election had 34 members of parliament. In this election, it's actually going to be 37. So there's going to be 3 more MPs going to Ottawa from Alberta. That just changes the political calculations a little bit in some of these ridings, because some populations have been hived off into new ridings, some populations are being added into old ridings. So it's a really complicated picture at the moment that you don't really get at from those high level sort of public polling figures, right? Because that's sort of province-wide. But then what you're really looking at is, in some cases, only a few hundred votes in these specific ridings that are determining who wins that election. So very hard to see. Certainly, if the Conservatives win the election, they're going to have, probably at least 30, 34 members of parliament to pick from for cabinet. If the Liberals end up winning the election, they'll maybe have 1 or 2, maybe 3. I mean, it's been about 50 years since the Liberals have elected more than 4 candidates in Alberta.
Wow. And then the provincial government has lately been blamed for funding for educational support to staff, as we have lately been seeing thousands of workers in Edmonton, Calgary, Fort McMurray, and elsewhere walk off the job earlier this year, and they've been on the picket lines. But this massive educational support staff strike looks like it's slowly drawing to a close. So, Tyler, this is a relief for parents, obviously.
It certainly is. My friends who are parents have been talking about this a lot. It's been thousands of people. They've been off the job for, in some cases, a couple months, I think. And obviously, middle of the school year, that causes a bit of strain on the school system. And so the Canadian Union of Public Employees represents most of these workers. These are admins, assistants, custodians, educational support of sort of all kinds here. And they're represented by CUPE and in the negotiations with the school boards, the Catholic school board and the secular school board as well. The province is not like, sort of directly involved, but they're going to be involved because, of course, they give the money to school boards to manage and things like that. So, and there's, been accusations that they've been meddling in negotiations and that sort of thing. So this is, even though this is a very local political issue, it, of course, reflects back on the province. And that is sort of the province's where they're getting caught up in it, so to speak. But it does seem like it's slowly coming to an end. I think Fort McMurray was the first to sign deals, both the Catholic school board and the secular school board, followed by Edmonton. Calgary, I believe they're maybe back on the job by Friday, depending on how some of these negotiations go. Because, of course, they get an agreement and then it needs to be ratified by the union and so on. So always a little bit of space for things to go wrong at sort of the 11th hour in these things. But it does look like things are sort of calming down, coming to a close, and folks will be back on the job in most of these areas that are striking.
Canada Border Services Agency released a statement Thursday saying they arrested a Calgary man on March 8th after discovering a large shipment of cocaine at the Coots port of entry. CBSA officers seized 108 kilograms of the drug after a secondary examination of the man's commercial transport vehicle. The man arrested, 26-year-old Arshdeep Singh of Calgary, was coming from the United States, where the load originated. He is now charged with importation and possession of a controlled substance for the purpose of trafficking. Singh is scheduled to appear at the Alberta Court of Justice in Lethbridge on May the 7th. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada has released its report into a plane crash at Toronto's Pearson Airport last month that sent 21 people to hospital. It found the aircraft's air alert system indicated a high rate of descent less than 3 seconds before touchdown. All passengers and crew members survived when the Delta Airlines plane burst into flames after flipping over and skidding on the tarmac. The report found the plane's landing gear folded into the retracted position at touchdown and the wing detached from the fuselage, releasing a cloud of jet fuel, which caught fire. And not a day goes by that someone's property isn't damaged by an airline. But one southern Alberta woman spent months fighting with Air Canada after her infant carrier was damaged and the airline would not replace the full cost of the car seat unit that clips into her stroller set. She was also advised by Alberta Health to not use the car seat since they felt its structural integrity had been compromised. Jeanette Roche spoke with this mom who's left wondering what the airline's actual policy is. Take a look.
I'd have no way to damage it like that.
Allison Raichie points out the damage her baby's car seat sustained following a recent flight she took on Air Canada.
Right away, I noticed like my handle was all scratched up.
When traveling from Vancouver to Calgary with her infant, Lincoln, she was told her car seat would be stored with the fragile cargo along with other fragile items. The airline told Raichie that upon arrival in Calgary, she could pick up the infant carrier at oversized baggage. But once in Calgary, Raichie says the car seat came off the regular luggage conveyor instead.
And we see my car seat tumble down the conveyor, hits into the side of the conveyor, and then we see like one or two pieces of like big 50-pound luggages, like a full luggage case, slide right into it on the carousel as well.
Raichie says she immediately noticed things weren't quite right with the car seat.
I took it to HS there, the health unit. That's where the health unit said, like, she's like, I wouldn't put my baby in it.
They said infant car seats are only designed to absorb the force of an impact once in order to remain structurally integral.
Because who's to say that I don't get in a car accident tomorrow and my car seat doesn't do the job that it was meant to do in the first place?
In a statement to BCN, Alberta Health Services says, quote, "You should always replace your car seat if there is visible damage. Car seats are tested for one-time collision use, but damage can also happen from other major impacts. Car seats have a maximum weight limit. Exceeding these weight limits by placing heavy items on car seats can weaken the structural integrity, thus compromising its safety for further use." After Raichie submitted her claims, she was disappointed to learn the airline would only reimburse her for half the cost of the designated amount, or $400 of the entire $800 set.
But it still doesn't replace like the infant seat that I had that goes with the stroller and everything like that.
She was able to send a photo of the receipt and a photo of the debit transaction from when it was purchased, but that was not sufficient for Air Canada.
All I want is replacement for exactly what I had there so that I can use it in my stroller. I'm really upset about it too because I spent a lot of time trying to pick out this car seat specifically, and then for it to get damaged by an airline that just won't replace the cost of it, like, it's definitely a bummer. And it's hard when you're a mom already trying to, right, when you're trying to raise a kid and that now you need to foot the bill for a couple extra $100.
BCN has reached out to Air Canada multiple times over the course of several weeks, and they have still not responded. For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Roche.
We should note that Raichie has spent several months fighting with Air Canada, and they agreed to shell out another $210 for a total of $630. The original car seat stroller set was $800, and without the car seat, the stroller set is useless until her baby gets old enough to use it without the carrier. After a week-long trip to the International Space Station turned into a 9-month stay, 2 NASA astronauts have finally touched down, or splashed down rather, on Earth.
And splashdown, Crew 9 back on Earth.
And it turns out our University of Lethbridge has a connection to NASA, as they have studied the effects of a changing environment on astronauts who go into outer space. Dr. Gerlinda Metz is a neuroscientist at the U of L. We've had her on our show before to discuss how stress factors can impact the body. Now, can you think of a more stressful or even hostile environment other than space? Probably not. Dr. Metz explains to BCN's Jeanette Roche what negative impacts these astronauts had to endure.
Are you able to, in a nutshell, explain what the negative impacts could be of going into outer space for as long as Sunny and Butch did this past year?
There are many issues to spend that long out there. They're socially isolated, they have vibration, they have noise, They are confined. They are disconnected from their friends and family. And of course, they experience what everyone first thinks about, which is microgravity and also radiation of space.
That's just crazy and fascinating. Dr. Metz, what about long-term effects? Now that they're back here on Earth, are their bodies going to be in shock from re-entering Earth's atmosphere, where they'll have to almost go through a decompression time frame almost?
Yeah, kind of, really. It's actually like you're saying. So they're actually going into a long-term rehab program. These astronauts have to slowly start learning to use their muscles. Along with that, they have to also make sure they are taking proper measures to build their bone strength back up if they can, because spaceflight is like an accelerated aging process. You go through aging like 10 times faster than what you see on Earth, and this will take quite a while probably to rebuild the strength to be able to walk properly and keep the body upright. So we have more liquid, more water in the eyes. The pressure of the eyes increases, and that can actually lead to damage in the retina and vision loss. And then we have changes in the brain too. Cognitive impairments. There were even a few studies suggesting that there would be higher risk of Alzheimer's disease, and they are exposed to higher levels of radiation consistently while they are on the ISS. And so cancer would be a concern.
Oh, that is a concern. Amazing stuff there. Dr. Metz, thanks so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us.
Up next, stories from around southern Alberta. Don't go away. A group of students from Chinook High School contributed to the fight against hunger by, of all things, building a friendly yellow structure made from cans of food. Our BCN's Heidi Echeverria has the story of Canstruction.
The structure that we came up with was SpongeBob SquarePants, the cartoon character.
Creativity of talent took over the Center Village Mall. Various structures made from cans of tuna, beans, mushroom, and coffee, among others, demonstrated that in Lethbridge, talent transforms food into work of art.
When we got to build day, it really was a culmination of a lot of hard work and effort.
Joining cans and shaping them until they achieved the desired result. Although they knew the challenge ahead, they desired to give it their all.
When we started meeting, it was kind of like unsure, but as the date kept coming up and we kept meeting more, I think we really developed a really nice, firm plan, and then that translated into a really fast and fun build process.
I don't have much relation to architecture or engineering, but it was like a cool insight into something.
Shows people what you can do with cans, but then also none of the food is wasted, and it goes to like a really good cause.
Everyone go vote for our SpongeBob and Gary at Center Village Mall.
We've been telling all our friends, so
to go vote for us. Yeah. So.
In a statement, Daryl Chuck, board chaired with the construction event, said the construction board conducted its judging on March 12. All winners will be announced on April 3rd. Public voting will close on April 2nd. The construction board will tally all the votes and determine the People's Choice Award winner, who will join the other winners selected by the judges. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echevarria.
Wow, what a creative initiative. And it's wonderful to see how members of our community are recognized for their significant contribution to society. During a ceremony hosted by the YMCA, awards and scholarships were presented, including the King Charles III Coronation Medal, the YMCA of Lethbridge Community Engagement Scholarship, and the RBC Future Launch Scholarship for Black Youth. Christina Larkin, YMCA Director of Community Development, shared more about the ceremony.
Our King Charles Medal winners today are people who have really gone above and beyond in their roles, which is one of the criteria. We put on the extra criteria of them being young people because we really want to highlight here at the YMCA of Lethbridge, the young people make a huge difference in their city and in their country. First, we have Wisdom, who is a volunteer here at the YMCA, and as an international student, he has gone above and beyond, juggling the many, many things that international students and newcomers to our community. And second, we have Paige, who is just a multifaceted, fantastic person here in Lethbridge. She's currently away as part of the 3-on-3 basketball team representing Team Canada.
It means a lot to be honored with this medal. I really appreciate everyone who noticed the work I've been doing so far. The work I've done so far in itself has been much more rewarding, be it parents complimenting me and everything, and I really, really appreciate that from parents as well.
The King Charles III Coronation Medal was introduced in early 2024 to commemorate His Majesty's coronation on May 6th of 2023. Congratulations to all the recipients. And even though we're in the age of a fast-paced digital world, research continues to highlight the importance and benefits of slowing down and reading a good book. The University of Lethbridge education professor Dr. Robin Bright explains the benefits of reading and how this habit has changed among Canadians.
Reading has taken a shift for sure in the last couple of decades, starting in around 2000 when digital media started to become really important. Reading has been decreasing. The most recent study in 2023 from BookNet shows that readers across Canada are decreasing in the amount of time, but it's still pretty robust in terms of how much time Canadians read. Something that we should point out is that Alberta students have been doing extremely well on international tests of literacy. However, overall, a lot of young people really drop off as readers after the elementary grades. Reading has a lot of other benefits as well, maintaining brain health, developing empathy, relaxation.
According to BookNet Canada, of the top 10 leisure and recreational activities performed by Canadians, watching videos and television is the first activity at 89%, while reading or listening to audiobooks is the 9th activity at 49%. After the break, tax season is upon us, and we have an expert on tax filing that can hopefully save you some money. That interview is next, and if you're watching us online, that full interview is available on our YouTube channel.